There are many characters that do not share the same limelight as those who are on the front lines of comics. In fact, many of these characters have been lost to the infinite abyss of comic book content. Many of these characters, despite being unique and intriguing, they faded into the dark. These characters, they've been abandoned, but not without a compelling and mysterious aura surrounding them. Hey everyone, it's Jeremy from Legacy Comics, and today I'll be examining one of these long-lost characters, DC's Beowulf. Before we start, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to tell me that you enjoy the content on this channel. And on with the video. The legend of the great and mighty Beowulf is one that has been passed on for centuries. A legend of a strong warrior from the Anglo-Saxon time period. A hero who destroyed mighty enemies and sought lof and dom. Well, that entire breakdown was pretty much useless because DC throws the story in a completely different direction. But before we get to the rest of the history of this long-lost character's canon in DC, let's talk about the character's creation and publication history. The character is rather old, and no, I'm not talking about how the story of Beowulf has been around for a literal millennium. Even if we disregard the original manuscripts, which would be a story from 700 AD, the DC iteration of the character was made and had its first appearance in Beowulf Dragon Slayer issue 1 in May 1975. The original author for this iteration of Beowulf was Michael Olsen and was illustrated by Ricardo Villamonte. The Beowulf series in DC Comics started out very close to the mythic Beowulf story from the early history of Europe. Still, soon enough, the story and the elements therein wildly veered away from the set story and ran into the popular element of science fiction, sweeping through the demographic of the time. The Beowulf title only lasted through 6 issues, running from 1975 to March of 1976, when it would soon be cancelled. While the character did relatively well with publishers at the time, the series was cut because of a significant problem at DC. A problem known as the DC implosion. A time where DC oversaturated their own titles, essentially drowning out all their publications by having too many series going on at once. This being the case, they attempted to solve the problem by cancelling many of their runs and titles to focus on their flagship series. If you want to know more information about the issues and the problems around this, make sure to comment down below and I can make another video for it. Soon after the series ended, the character fell into obscurity for over 30 years until making yet another appearance in Volume 2 of Wonder Woman in 2008. While the character of Beowulf was hinted to be the same as the one of the 1975 series, the story as presented in the 2008 Wonder Woman story is far too convoluted to match the same timeline and general storyline of that Beowulf. Nevertheless, the initial question once again presents itself. Who is Beowulf? And secondly, why did the character remain dormant for 30 years before making a comeback as a completely different version? Well, let's look at the character all the way back in 1975. DC starts off the traditional story of Beowulf similarly to how it played out in the great epic poem of the original story in the first few issues of this comic. Nearing the beginning of the story, Beowulf finds himself in the presence of a mysterious being known as the Shaper. The Shaper explains that the great castle of Hrothgar needs to be reconquered, and the literal spawn of the devil himself, Grendel, must be destroyed. A being that is considered to be worse than death itself. Grendel, after emerging from the swamp, he seeks to kill all that reside in the mead hall of Hrothgar, because as Grendel puts it, he hates the sound of life. Grendel enters the mead hall and proceeds to murder everyone. Beowulf, although being tasked with the defeat of Grendel, is quickly led off on a completely different path and journey. One to the underworld, where he finds a stifling warrior named Nanzi, who is also a siren, and saves her from her own demons that are controlling her. Beowulf, Nanzi, and their party, including Hansko and Wiglaf, continue their journey to Hrothgar. Yet another problem throws itself into the fray as they are cast right into a swampy area. The group of warriors attempts to battle a group of swamp men in a horrid bog. We soon come to learn that Grendel and his mother are from the same lineage as Cain. You know, the guy who killed his brother with a rock after God rejected his sacrifice. Meanwhile, our friends and Beowulf sink into quicksand, falling into a strange gateway into hell. And Grendel is spoken to by Satan and told to kill all except the queen, king, and shaper over at Hrothgar. A little while later, our heroes find themselves in the presence of Satan himself, where he explains that he was just kinda bored by Hrothgar being thrashed apart Grendel's wreaking havoc wherever he can find it, and the character known as Unferth has just been causing misfortune for our heroes throughout the duration of this journey. As the series continues to progress, we soon learn that the only way for Beowulf to slay Grendel is with nectar of Zumak fruit. Amidst this portion of the story, Grendel also tells Satan that he can either send Beowulf by the next full moon, or he will go to hell and rip Satan apart himself. Within some of these issues of Beowulf along the way to defeat Grendel, he encounters other characters such as Dracula and a mysterious lost tribe of Israel, Ulysses accompanied by a troop of Greek warriors, Egyptian/Sumerian space aliens, and even the lost city of Atlantis. Panels nearing the last few issues get a little bit wacky, but it follows the trend of science fiction, and in fact, on one page, many of these things happen at once. Many of these tasks help to build up for the final issue, and within the final issue of the series, Beowulf Nanzi travel from the lost city of Atlantis to Crete, where they finally get their hands on some Zumak fruit, where they can have a chance at now defeating Grendel. They enter the labyrinth of King Minos, where Beowulf battles a Minotaur which is being controlled by Satan. Also, not previously mentioned, Satan has made Dracula his heir over Greel. Grendel kills Satan by smashing a stalactite into his back, and the Minotaur dies. And Beowulf eats some Zumak fruit, and by doing so, Beowulf is endowed with the strength to match that of Grendel. Beowulf, Nanzi, and their friends make their way back to Daneland to slay Grendel, who has taken Satan's place as king of the underworld. Funnily enough, the series, because of its cancellation, never received a final resolution. We never got to see Beowulf finish Grendel, and we never got to see a clear ending to the story depicted in DC. Once again, for 30 years, the character vanished, the series vanished, and mention of Beowulf seemingly lost to history. Why was this the case? Well, we already discovered the reason why the series ended due to the DC implosion, but why didn't DC ever try to retcon or bring back a character like this? Questions like this most likely will never be given a fully fleshed out answer. I attempted to reach out to the author who brought back Beowulf in 2008, Gail Simone, and thanks to some friends and goons on Twitter, we managed to get her to respond. She firstly explained that ever since DC dabbled in sword and sorcery, she was very interested in many of these characters, notably Claw, Stalker, and obviously Beowulf. As she put it, Beowulf wasn't strictly an adaptation. It was more of a new interpretation of the epic poem, but it was written and drawn in a very high degree of quality. Around the same time that DC released Beowulf, it was also the same time that Marvel published Conan and Red Sonja. The next thing she said in regards to some of these older characters and their comics, though, was very insightful. They were clearly not going to be able to sustain their own books. The idea that characters no longer get publications because of limited material and public appeal had occurred to me. But sure, these could have just been retconned into new eras of DC by means of crossovers and time travel. But they also have to be dependent on what's going to last with success. Because of circumstances of the implosion and Beowulf's steadily declining popularity, Beowulf slowly faded out of view. She also went on to say more about Wonder Woman Volume 2, bringing back the characters that she did for the arc of Wonder Woman, along with the different versions of Wonder Woman in each world, helped to make one of her favorite arcs, noting that a more connected DCU was something to miss, and the artistic help that she received from Aaron Labretzky made the experience even more fun. She finished everything off by saying bringing back some of these older characters is fascinating. After all, many of these hidden gem characters, such as Stalker, still hold much potential. After our short interview, I got to thinking, considering the uniqueness of Wonder Woman Volume 2, where Beowulf, Wonder Woman, and Stalker team up to defeat Demon Lord Dagurth, the arc allowed for many of these returning characters. But what would DC look like with a new return of many of these characters in different situations? We see this happen with Beowulf yet again. In the New 52, we also received another iteration of Beowulf, where he lived in a post-apocalyptic future where everyone had reverted back to the old way of life. In this story, he was created as a super soldier and beats up a bunch of soldiers that are meant to kill him. He learns from a young child named Wiglaf that Hrothgar is under attack by Grendel, and after Wiglaf and Beowulf confront Grendel, we learn that his brother is Grendel, designed to empower average humans to fight the alien races and metahumans infecting their Earth, which is kind of a cool spin. Although we will never fully know how these old characters returning to new stories would look and turn out like, we can always see what stories with returning characters can look like. Leaving these characters to rot is something that does not need to happen. Beowulf, a character left by DC's shadow of publications, finally received a chance to shine, and Gail's Wonder Woman arc was fantastic as a story. Who knows, maybe down the road, we can see many of these long-lost characters return to their homes on the front page of comics, basking in the glory of their return to fame. The character of Beowulf, although a sad and brief history, he is a reminder and a legacy of what we should not forget. A special thanks to Gail Simone for being active and personal to her fans and other comic readers. Her insight and love for comics is amazing, and I'm extremely honored to be able to have had a conversation about Beowulf and Wonder Woman Volume 2. Thank you for that very much, Gail. If you like this video, make sure to leave a thumbs up and make sure to like and subscribe and share the video with your friends. Also, you can turn on that notification bell if you want to be alerted for the next time I make a video. Make sure to leave any questions, ideas, comments down below. This is Jeremy from Legacy Comics signing out. See ya!